Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Kul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalit. Walam yulat. Walam yakullahu. Kufuwan ahad. Sadaqallahu lazim. Assalamu alaikum and very good evening to all our friends from different parts of the world. Today we are hosting Diversity and Inclusion Conference under the lockdown globally. Corporate Pakistan Group, Nutshell Conferences, and ACCA are jointly hosting this global conference. We initiated this conference only 1 week back, and thanks to digital and the virtual world, we are still in the phase of learning. The global community restricted to their homes or in their cities, or at least wherever they were 1 month back, they are still there. But despite all these challenges, all these barriers, all these troubles, we are optimists. And my own personal learning is that the future is bright. Current crisis provides us an opportunity to evaluate ourselves, rethink about our country, where we are standing, about our organization, and as individual also, as human. What we were doing earlier, what is the current crisis, and what is the future? How to upgrade ourselves, how to serve this world, this global community. And because of this lockdown, we are witnessing hundreds and hundreds of webinars, virtual sessions. So there are no physical meetings, no fellowships, no fun together, but virtually we are more connected. And my another learning is that we are more focused, we are more busy gradually. And under all these circumstances, when we initiated the support to the needy families in Pakistan, we generated a handsome amount within 2 days. There was no cash handling. There was no one was outside home or outside office. We generated in 48 hours through WhatsApp, through messages, not a single call to anyone, to any corporate leader, to any business leader in Pakistan or abroad. And within 48 hours, we crossed our target. And through 3 credible organizations, we distributed the food and other stuff to the needy families. And this process is still in continuation. Later, we hosted some seminars on local issues as well as about the business continuity under COVID-19. And we decided to host this Diversity and Inclusion Conference. I approach all our speakers who are available with us today for this conference, amazing speakers faculty from different parts of the world. And within 2 days, we engage everyone. So initially we designed this conference for 3 hours, but we extended the time up to 5 hours. So people from different parts of the world will join different sessions and their favorite speakers as well. So our format is, but before going to the format, I want to pay my thanks to all the speakers who are here and to all the panelists and moderators. And our special thanks to ACCA for partnering with us. Since last many years, we are partnering for different learning activities, for knowledge sharing. And we hosted their global presidents twice. We hosted their global CEO, their different leaders. And I think they are doing amazing work, and our synergies going very good, very productive. And we receive very good feedback. So when we decided this conference, so I talked to country head of Pakistan, ACCA, my friend Sajid Aslam, and I'm grateful to Sajid and his team, Helen Brand, the global CEO of ACCA based in London, and my friend Ayla Majid, who is the global council member from Pakistan. I'm also very grateful to all our friends in 22 countries who actually promoted this conference all over the world, in different African countries, all over in United States, in Canada, in Europe, in Far East, in Asian countries, in Middle East, and in South Asia as well. So they all are friends, promoted and shared about this conference with everyone. And we are expecting, this is our estimate, let's see how much we are true. We are expecting around 150,000 delegates today in next few hours. I'm also very grateful to my team of Nutshell. I want to avoid to mention the names, but I want to acknowledge my all friends who worked hard in last 4 or 5 days. And this is a new experience. This is a new world, but this is a new reality. And this is better for us to upgrade ourselves, to cope up with the new technologies and the new realities, to serve better for the humanity, for the society, for our country, for our organization, and most important, for our own selves. Today's format is that this is the inaugural session, and there are 3 speakers, and all 3 are my favorite. First, I want to acknowledge Jacqueline, the global CEO and founder of Acumen. I hosted her in Islamabad in Leaders in Islamabad Summit, and later in Karachi, the financial capital of Pakistan, for a dinner discussion 3 years back. She's big ambassador, big personality, very respectable human in Pakistan and in this part of the world, South Asia and Middle East. Everyone is in love with Jacqueline, and she deserved. So I especially engage her for the opening keynote of this conference. A second keynote for the inaugural is Carlos. He is the Chief Innovation Officer for SAP. Amazing speaker, world-class speaker. This is my first interaction with him, but I'm grateful to our dear friend Ahmed Al-Fifi, who is the Regional Managing Director for SAP Middle East and Asia, and also the country head of Pakistan, SAP, Mr. Saqib Ahmed. We are collaborating since long and doing some good work together in the field of knowledge sharing and conferences. A third speaker for the keynote, for the inaugural session, is also a big personality. I met her first time in Davos last year during the World Economic Forum. She is famous for equality lounges, and I was really inspired with this lady. I attended many sessions of their lounges during my stay in Davos, and later we met in Riyadh during the Future Investment Initiative Conference, and we decided to collaborate to host conferences in Pakistan and in the region, including Dubai. So we collaborated for Leaders in Islamabad in last March. Unfortunately, because of the lockdown, we postponed the conference, and now new dates are July 16 and 17. So I especially called her and I asked her to join. Despite lockdown, she's active on daily basis. I'm following her on social media. And I think she is one of the best speakers and authority on equality, women leadership, and diversity and inclusion. So these 3 are our speakers for the inaugural session, 15 minutes each. This is 1 hour session, followed by 3 panel discussions for 1 hour each, 5 panelists in every session and 1 moderator. I will introduce the panel later. And closing session is again with 3 speakers, 1 from Canada, 1 from US, and 1 from London. So without any further delay, I want to request Jacqueline of Acumen for her inaugural address to set the tone of the conference. And I wish you all good luck, a productive conference, full of learning, full of fun, and full of networking virtually. Thanks to everyone again for your presence here, and also invite your other friends, your colleagues, your families to attend this conference. Majority are in their homes or in offices, so this is easy to attend this conference virtually. So spread the message, visit the Facebook page of ACCA, and attend this conference. Jacqueline, over to you, And ladies and gentlemen, I'm presenting you Jacqueline of Acumen.
Thank you so much, Asfar. Assalamu alaikum, and good morning and good evening and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, to everyone who's gathered. It's a real tribute to you and the Nutshell conferences, Asfar, to bring us all together. I start every talk with gratitude. This one not only is not different, but in this moment of Corona crisis, when so many of you are experiencing grief and loss, and all of us are experiencing a level of anxiety. Gratitude for the fact that we're all together, that we have the privilege of even being able to reimagine together what this world could be, and to work on it with the kinds of resources that we do, not to mention for the homes that we have and the way that we can shelter. Gratitude. Asfar asked me to spend about 20 minutes telling you what Acumen does, and really think about it in this moment. And so we started this organization 19 years ago, 2001, with the mission of changing the way the world tackles poverty. I had worked on Wall Street, and I'd also worked on building a microfinance bank in Rwanda. Both places that have known different kinds of crises, and Rwanda an extraordinary humanitarian one. And so I've kind of cut my teeth on crisis and innovation. But what I came out of both experiences with was this idea that neither markets alone nor charity alone was enough to solve our problems of poverty, that we had to reimagine it. And that what was most critical was to see capital as a tool, not as something that would control us, and to stand with the poor in everything we did. And what we meant by that was that if we could design our systems to include the poor and the vulnerable first, they would be much more resilient, and they would be much more powerful for all of us. But until we did that, we were going to have this bifurcated system. In the very beginning, we had a single big idea, essentially, that sat at the middle of Acumen, which was patient capital, that we would raise philanthropic money and then we would invest it in intrepid entrepreneurs who were going where markets had failed the poor, where government and aid had fallen short, in critical services like healthcare, education, energy, agriculture, housing. We would invest for 8 to 12 years, sometimes longer, and we would accompany our entrepreneurs with the kind of management assistance and social connections that would enable them to try and fail and try again until they had actually not only built companies, but in the best of cases, changed systems. And we would not only measure what mattered and learn to do that on the impact side, but any money that came back to Acumen, because we were a nonprofit, would be reinvested in innovation for the poor. Over time, we've invested about $130 million in about 130 companies, and brought in co-investment, increasingly traditional forms of capital, to the tune of about $750 million, and have impacted over 300 million of the world's very poor. I'm just going to give you one example of exactly how, not exactly how it works, but over time, before I do that, over time, we realized that patient capital wasn't enough, that we needed to essentially build a network of ourselves, different kinds of products and tools that we could use. So we had the core of patient capital, which I've just described, and we built local offices around the world so that we would have the benefit of being locally rooted and globally connected in India, Pakistan, East Africa, West Africa, Latin America, and now the United States. As we saw some of our companies grow, we knew we needed more traditional kinds of capital even before some of the impact investors would go in. And so we've created 3 for-profit funds, one in energy, one in agriculture and climate change, one in Latin America, another 150 million in assets that are being managed in that pool under a separate subsidiary. We saw that the most important kind of capital was human capital. And so we started to invest in character and built a fellows program that now numbers about 700 fellows around the world, that then is buttressed by an online academy that has seen about 1 million people sign up and take courses on social entrepreneurship. All the different pieces that we teach our fellows, because we're seeing a movement, as all of you know and are part of, in how do we reimagine and rebuild systems for our world where too many of our traditional institutions have run their course. And if there's ever been a moment in our history, it's the moment of coronavirus that has exposed the gaping wounds to so many of our systems. As we learned to measure what matters and we stood with the poor, what we also came to understand was that unless we were listening to the voices of the poor, we weren't really measuring impact. And so we began a system where we would text thousands of customers from our companies at a time. We would get answers to their questions from which we would deduce real understanding of impact from the perspective of the poor clients and customers of our companies. Over time, so many other organizations saw value in that we became almost a consulting arm and decided to spin it off as a for-profit called 60 Decibels, which now has enumerators working in 200 languages in 40 countries around the world. And our hope is that we get enough data so that we can start to benchmark across not just financial metrics, but social metrics as we decide where to invest capital as individuals and as a society. The example, 2007, two guys came into our offices with a solar torch that cost about $30 and a dream to eradicate kerosene. At the time, 1.5 billion people lived in darkness and depended on kerosene for their light source. We took a bet at the prototype stage with our patient capital on this company called D-Light. We didn't know how to price it. There was no financing available. People didn't trust the product. There were no markets. That's what we're talking about when we say we invest in those intrepid entrepreneurs that are trying to build companies that can long-term build systems for change. Over a 10-year period, we put about $5 million of our philanthropic-backed capital into this company. And you can see how the company started to grow. About 2017, though, it needed a $50 million round, and that's where the for-profit Kawisafi Fund could help it actually get to scale. 12 of our fellows have worked in that company, and we also used our social capital to connect D-Light to companies like Unilever and Total so that they could work with their supply chains and really move this idea into the world. And it was thrilling at Davos this year to see D-Light announce to the world that they had just crossed 100 million low-income people on this planet that now have access to light and electricity because of that single endeavor. Role models and business models are what we need for a world that needs to reimagine capitalism. And so we saw around D-Light a number of other companies start to grow in this decentralized off-grid way of bringing solar electricity to low-income people. We're now the largest off-grid solar investor for the poor in the world. And so we can see across the industry, where does capital work? Where is it not working? Where do we need different kinds of partnerships with government for us to solve our electricity problems? And if you're looking at a continent like Africa, and I dare say Pakistan, where the grid is not reaching, this is such a powerful way to electrify low-income populations, rural populations, that is also an anti-fragility approach to how we solve our problems. In this moment of crisis, you can imagine in off-grid even, we've got to save this new infrastructure because it hasn't fully been embedded, certainly not in every country. So it's been thrilling to watch other players, corporations, development finance institutions, more traditional investors, individuals come together, and we're part now of a coalition that's beginning to collaborate to raise $100 million so that we can provide bridge financing and other kind of support for the off-grid sector. But it also makes me pause and look back, because I do think in a moment of crisis, we really face two choices. What we see too traditionally is the whole world recognizes that we're one, that we're connected, that we have never felt more human in our lives. Right now, we've probably not ever felt more vulnerable. But too often what we've seen is that we stave off the suffering during the emergency and after we go back to the status quo. What's extraordinary about this moment is everyone I know is starting to understand that there is no going back to the status quo. The world is changing even as we speak, and all of us need to be thinking about how we reimagine the new systems for the world. I love that Azfar started by saying that crisis is also a moment for innovation. And when I think about the history of my own organization, and I listen to SAP and other corporations that are sitting on this call, so many of you who run organizations, it is in those moments of crisis that we define who we are as human beings, who we are as leaders, how we influence the world. We were 5 months old in New York City with a mighty team of 4, that included my assistant, when the planes hit the towers the morning of 9/11. We were actually moving into our offices right next door to the World Trade Center. And I had losses in my extended family and network of friends. And so you ask yourself, what do we do? There was no bucket brigade to participate in. And so very quickly decided to do what we do best and bring a diverse crew together of people who could help us think through a fledgling organization that was focused on global poverty. I feared that many of our prospective donors would want to only focus on New York, despite how interconnected that day meant and was for all of us in the world. Had a roundtable at the end of it. Someone said, if you were king, what would you do? I said, I would go into the Muslim world and I would identify those extraordinary entrepreneurs that were building inclusive, sustainable entities to show the world what human beings were capable of doing inside their countries and out. Be careful what you say out loud. Within a few days, had received a $1 million check and thought, now what do I do? As life would have it, I went to Pakistan. I'd never been there in my life. And yet I met extraordinary individuals who would change my life. The country would change Acumen. And it has been a great privilege to work in that country, learn from that country. One of the first people I met was a man named Tasneem Siddiqui, who introduced us to the concept of incremental housing for the poor. Again, how do you start with the poor and understand their perspective and then build for them? Around that time, I also met a young man from Baltimore who's on the screen, Javad Aslam, Pakistani American who wanted to give back to his parents' homeland. And so he moved to Pakistan. He worked with Tasneem. We invested in him to build the first for-profit, affordable, low-income mortgage Sharia compliant product for the poor about 18 kilometers outside of Lahore. It was another journey full of crisis, ups and downs. But a few years ago, watching Javad, not only having built a viable community for about 3,000, an example, a role model, and a business model for the world, but to sell half his company and raise about $35 million from external foreign investors to repay Acumen and show that this is possible, that we can solve these problems, is taking crisis and moving into changing ourselves in ways that teach. I also learned through many of the crises, including in Pakistan, the importance not only of character and capital, but of community. In the floods of 2010, a number of our board members called and said, even though Acumen doesn't do emergency funding, come, witness, be a communicator, tell the stories, help raise grant funding for the emergency. And so I traveled the country with board member Ali Siddiqui. In the back is Farouk Khan, who would become our country director after that trip. And we did witness, and we saw the business community stand together and in Ali's case, feed and shelter 10,000 people. We learned who we were again as a community, and I started to understand that if we just saw ourselves as investors without understanding the community that was interwoven, we would sell ourselves and the communities we were serving short. Other community members like Farouk like Zafar Khan and Zubair Sumra, Babar Ali, for the Pakistanis in the crowd, were all coming together to ask, what could we do? How do we do it? Dr. Rashid Bajwa of the NRSP Bank, at the time, we were working together to transform the nonprofit microfinance organization that NRSP Bank was doing with low-income farmers in the southern Punjab into a for-profit. And again, it was his understanding, his moral imagination, his proximity to the communities that he was serving that enabled us to change the way we did business as we looked into the future. This idea of the moral imagination is so critical. It's the heart of what we need in the world right now. We need to find those entrepreneurs and be those individuals ourselves, no matter where we sit in our organizations, that have the humility to see the world around us and to recognize the ugliness that we're seeing in our systems, but not be people who fall into despair, nor cynics that do not act, nor simple empaths that throw money without recognizing that we simultaneously have to retool and imagine the future that could be and start moving toward it. And so I've been so excited of late to be talking to fellows in our community that are doing just that. And I just want to highlight a few. In Pakistan, there's 127 fellows. As I said before, these young leaders join about 700 fellows around the world in all of our geographies, including Malaysia, Bangladesh, the UK, Spain, and to watch them collaborate not only in their own country to try to solve problems that are within the domain of their control is just thrilling. A couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with a woman named Sohani Mohan, who built a distributed manufacturing company in Bombay, India, to bring menstrual health products into rural areas of India where women have no access and where big commercial companies do not go. It's a long story, but she now has about 40 factories up and running. But when India went into lockdown, that distributed model that depended on people going door to door came to a standstill. At the time, menstrual health products were deemed non-essential goods. And so as a real entrepreneur, she, number one, fought and got the product deemed essential. But second, she partnered with Mahindra, one of the largest automobile and trucking manufacturing companies in India, who helped her retool her factories so that she could make masks, and gave her the use of one of their factories so that she would have a safe place to do it where her employees could sleep and work. When Muhammad Mustafa of Islamabad heard this story, he was thinking about whether he would have to close down his own company, Mauka Online, which is sort of an Uber for domestic workers based out of Islamabad. But instead, he took a cue from Suhani and quickly converted his company to one in which he trained and got materials to all of the different employees, the domestic workers, so that they could make masks inside their homes. And he used his platform, his technology platform, to ask his customers to donate masks, thereby providing enough revenue so that we could keep jobs, he can keep jobs going, he can provide to his country, and he can start to think about building more flexibility in for the future. We're also seeing fellows model what we need to see more of in the world that has been too focused on competition, when what this virus is teaching us is we need collaboration. The man on your far right, Abdul Mufti, is a fellow working at the Ministry of Education for the Punjab. And when he was given the task of figuring out how to continue to educate kids when schools are shut, he turned and worked with two of his fellows, Daniel Noorani and Harun Yassin. Daniel, who has a television show that brings cartoons and stories to young people so that they can learn about their country values and gain education. And Harun Yassin, Kalimabad, who has about 200,000 young people already taking his ed tech courses online. These two have been deeply creative in bringing content, and Abdal has also helped them get access to taking that content even wider in partnership, in collaboration with government. You've got civil society, private sector, and government represented. And Sarah Said Khurram, who runs Sehat Kahani, which is a health tech provider, a series of 26 clinics, health clinics for telemedicine, so that she could get doctoring and medicine to low-income rural women inside Pakistan. When the clinics were closed with lockdown, she turned to the app that is also part of her business and decided to make it free during this crisis. So as you can imagine, utilization and demand for the app went through the roof. And so suddenly she also found volunteer doctors across Pakistan and realized that she was also getting people asking to volunteer from the diaspora. And again, working in collaboration with, this time, the Sindh government, she was able to get approvals so that she could move quickly, serve people. And what I'm watching is this unleashing of citizenship and creativity and collaboration, and this idea that technology and capital do not need to control us, we can control them. And there are so many stories like this. And this is the moment, again, where I see so much anxiety, where we also have to lift our role models and our business models. I just want to end with what this was, that what kept us all together, though, because at the bottom of this is a new value set. I'll let you read it yourselves, but this is a value set that has to put humanity, the earth, at the center of everything we do, and not profit. What makes me so sober is the crisis around us. We have a long way to go. We are going to go through a lot of pain together as a world. And what gives me that hard-edged hope that I talk about here is this community of people that I am seeing growing all across the world, who refuse to be pushed down by despair and are finding new ways to interact, new ways to work in the world. And so if I start with gratitude, let me end with love. Because if I have learned one thing, it is that we don't get dignity as a human race until all of us get dignity. And so I wish you all the best as you recreate and reimagine a world for all of us, which is the only world that will work. Thank you.
So thank you, Jacqueline, for, as usual, a wonderful address and set the tone for the Diversity Inclusion Conference. I'm grateful to you for your time and for your efforts to serve the community, to serve the global community, not only one country. I'm witnessing you since long that you are really doing a commendable work. And this is your spirit, and this is your dedication, that you are an inspirational leader for all of us. Thanks again for your presence. I'm seeing my American friend based in Middle East, Ron Thomas. He's online with us. And our next speaker is Chief Innovation Officer for SAP Europe, Middle East, and Africa, Carlos. And he will talk about building inclusive workplaces. Over to you, Carlos, for your address. And thanks for joining us on our request, despite very short notice. Thank you very much. And thanks to SAP.
Thank you very much, Azfar. Thank you. Congratulations, Jacqueline, for a great presentation. I'm just double checking that you can see my screen with a beautiful picture of Babar. Correct, good. So, because I'm gonna talk about the story of Babar. Babar was born in a mountain, so literally. That is not strange when you are born in a country with more than 100 peaks above 7,000 meters. So climbing mountains had been Babar's passion, together with Shakib, his best friend. So Babar had taken now the biggest challenge so far, reaching the K2 top, his first 8,000 meter, the biggest mountain in Pakistan. So in fact, as you very well know, in local Balti language, the K2 is called Chogori, that literally translates into big mountain. After many asks, Babar convinced Shakib to go with him. But Shakib said it very clearly, I will not go to the top of a mountain with you. I will go as far as the next base camp. So as simple as it may sound, the first base camp is a very important place. It is where you make sure that you are ready, that you have the right companions, the right equipment, the selection of the route is the right one, and the conditions are ideal. But they did not. They did not listen to the Sherpas and did not take the right equipment as it was too heavy. So Shakib told Babar, next time you listen to someone, listen to that person as if who's talking is a genius. You will find yourself paying more attention, learning more, and being more present. You will also find yourself enjoying more. So Babar could not agree more with this first base camp lesson, and he tried to convince Shakib to go with him to the top of the mountain. After a lot of conversation, Shakib said it very clearly, I will not go to the top of the mountain with you. I will go as far as the next base camp. So the small group started the journey to the second base camp when a big snowstorm fell upon them. Everyone had a different opinion and they sounded insecure and lost in the middle of this storm. But eventually they made it to the second base camp. Shakib told Babar, next time you have to talk to someone, think that you are a genius, that only your ideas will make a difference. You will find yourself developing your full potential and giving your maximum to the others. You will, yes, find yourself uncomfortable with the responsibility to add value, but you will become an incredible contributor and with time, a great leader. So Babar understood the second base lesson. Shakib was just there to help, and he wanted Babar to take control of his expedition. But Babar did not want to continue this journey without Shakib. So there he went again to try to convince Babar to go to the top of the mountain with him. But Shakib said it very clearly, I will go to the next base camp, not to the peak. So the team started the journey to the third base camp when it was still nighttime. Soon after they started, they found too much snow to continue in their pre-selected journey. Babar listened to everyone around him, to everyone's opinion, and devoted a long time, too long, looking for consensus in the group, while they were freezing in the middle of a windy part of the mountain. So they arrived to the third base camp completely exhausted, with too little energy to settle down appropriately. So Shakib told Babar, next time you need to take a decision, do not look for consensus. Some of the best decisions are controversial. A leader needs to be ready to go without consensus. A leader needs to understand where the energy of the team should be channeled. So Babar absorbed the third base lesson and asked his mate for companionship to go to the top of the mountain. But Shakib said it very clearly, I will go to the next base camp. So once again, they left to the fourth base camp, This is the last one before attempting to reach the peak of the mountain. The weather dramatically changed, and they found themselves not only with very little oxygen to breathe, but with temperatures minus 60 degrees Celsius, 10 degrees lower than expected. They arrived to the fourth base with several broken fingers, some of them frozen fingers. Some of the team members decided to start the journey down, but Babar and others decided to continue all the way up. So Shakib told Babar, having a big idea is simple. Solve a different future that does not exist yet and wait for the present to catch up. Did you consider temperatures going this low? Did you plan for it? The present caught up and you were not ready. Babar absorbed the fourth base lesson, and he asked Shakib for his help to go to the top. But Babar said it very clearly, you will go to your next objective, the top. I will be waiting for you at the plateau to celebrate your success, to celebrate your achievement. So Babar did not understand why Shakib did not want to make it to the top when he was so close, but he accepted it. A few hours later, he was at the top of a mountain with part of his team. He looked around and missed Shakib so much. He recognized the great sacrifice of his friend. Shakib excluding himself from reaching the peak, from the glory of reaching the peak. So inclusion means much more than adding everyone. Sometimes it's more about excluding oneself from the lights to let others shine. So the way down to the plateau is very risky. In fact, it is easier to fall down than to fall when you're going up. Babar and the team were completely exhausted, but Babar knew one thing. He was not going to the plateau. He was going to the fourth base. So Babar knows that he needs to solve a future that does not exist yet and wait for the present to catch up. He will fail many times in selecting the potential future. But if he includes everybody around him, he will be proven right some other times. Today, 68% of men in Pakistan are part of the workforce, while only 20% of women. A future that does not exist yet is a future where both women and men contribute equally to the work inside and outside the house. This is a work that is worth getting ready for. At SAP, we help Women at Risk International Foundation in Nigeria, supporting rural female population via mobile devices. In our companies, we can only take decisions about the potential future if we have end-to-end integrated processes, if we have real-time insights across areas, if we have an integrated analytics layer that allows us to enrich operational data with customer experience data. This is how SAP enables the intelligent enterprise, allowing us to take decisions today that guides us into the future. And Babar was now going down to the third base. He remembers that consensus is not always the best recipe. He will use analytical tools to look for exceptions, to find the black swans. So in business ecosystems that change so rapidly as the weather can change in a mountain, we need tools like SAP Analytics Cloud in the business context to look for the signal in the noise. Tools like profitability management to understand in this COVID environment what it's profitable and what not, what operations to stop. Integrated business planning to help us see ahead and defend necessary decisions as a leader that may be controversial. So in our current fluid COVID environment, We need such leaders of substance. SAP customers like Banco Compartamos in Mexico, via Banking the Unbanked strategy, has ensured that all citizens and SMEs are heard and are part of that recovery. So now Babar was reaching the second base, and Babar reminds that his organization has the responsibility to talk clearly, standing out and providing direction and vision in difficult times. So today, his organization is not only his human organization, but is his cyber capabilities. He knows that he needs to take the best of his people and the best of his cyber capabilities. Beyond Bias is an artificial intelligence SAP solution that helps ensure that we are being fair and inclusive in all our recruiting decisions. So in general, cyber capabilities in our organizations are going to help us reach to our customers in a completely personalized, intelligent way to create the best products and service recommendations. And we're going to do this with a marketing cloud. Other ways to use our cyber capabilities, for example, with intelligent robot process automation, will take charge of every repetitive task in our organization, and also with chatbots that are going to help us stay in contact with our customers 24/7 to provide genuine support while we let humans decide how they enhance every process. And the last part was his trip to the first base. When he reaches the first base, Babar remembers that his organization needs to listen to whoever is talking as if that person is a genius. So he will actively use experience management solutions to listen to their customers, to listen to the employees, to listen to their partners, and move from design, build, and sell to listen, design, build, and sell. At SAP, programs like Global Autism at Work have brought us a lot of value in diversity, looking for the genius in everyone, bringing incredibly skilled colleagues that are adding a lot of value and enriching our team's talent. So let me just finish by telling you that when Babar reaches the plateau, Shekib is waiting for him, but Babar has a very serious face. He shouts at Shekib, "I was tracking back our footprints all the way down the mountain, but I arrived to the place where the big storm hit us going up, and I realized that only my footprints, only 2 footprints were there. You abandoned me and chose a different route in the most difficult moment." At that time, Shekib looked at Babar. He smiled and told him, "You can look at our 4 footprints going all the way up to the 4th base. However, while the storm was hitting us, you felt unconscious for a while. That's the reason you can only see 2 footprints as I was holding you in my arms." And that's my closing. If you have your own Shekibs around you, listen to them, whether they are called Shekib or Sarah. Build yourself the best of your versions and be your best version with the help of others. In that journey, think about how SAP can help you listen to your customer, bringing automation to your processes, embedding intelligence in every one of your strategic decisions, and making every customer interaction delightful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos, for excellent talk and an inspiring story. Our third speaker is Shelley Zalis, as I mentioned earlier, the Equality Lounge lady, the famous brand globally on women leadership space. I'm really inspired with her work, her team, her daughter, and all the team members. And we are going to collaborate in the near future also for different knowledge sharing activities in Pakistan and in Dubai as well during our future summit on November 3, 4, 2020 at Atlantis. So today's topic for Shelley is the future of equality. Ladies and gentlemen, I am presenting to you Shelley Zalis from California.
Oh
Please
my
start.
goodness. Thank you. I am Assalamu alaikum. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. And I loved following the two incredible speakers, especially talking about the value proposition, as well as assume everyone is a genius, because we learn something from every single person that we meet. So I put together a little something called Advancing Equality Together, because what is clear, and Azfar, you brought this up before, we talk about social distancing. I actually think that we are physically distancing, but more socially connected than ever before. And so it is such a great honor to be part of this incredible group of geniuses. And with that, just to give you a brief background on who we are a female-owned business, and especially for female small business owners today in the COVID-19 moment, it's incredibly challenging as a small business to do it all, to be at home working as primary caregivers, as well as being serial entrepreneurs, needing to manage in moments of crisis. And I always look for the silver lining, because I believe when there is crisis, there's always opportunity. And how do we pivot with positivity? How do we pivot with proactivity? Because I believe that when we have these challenges, this is when we rise to the top with innovation, with creativity. And most importantly, a company alone has power, but collectively we have impact. And this is this incredible moment in time that I believe we will all look back and say, there have been some significant challenges, but there's also big opportunities. And when you look at the World Economic Forum's global goals, global goal number 17 is all about partnerships. There has never been a more important time for partnerships, private public sector partnerships, within organizations, within teams, with our customers. It is about the power of collaboration today, yesterday, and more importantly, for defining our future together. But we can't keep just talking about the problems, or as I say, we can't just admire the problems. We have to activate solutions for change. And we also have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to create accountability for that change. And that requires metrics to measure where we are, where we want to go, and then how we're going to get there. And so we know the business case. We all talk about the business case for equality. We know that diversity and inclusion is good for equality. We know that gender diverse teams are more profitable and more innovative. Organizations that embrace diversity and inclusion have higher employee satisfaction and less turnover. We know that companies that elevate women are more effective across the board. These are facts. And as a matter of fact, when you think about all that data that I just shared, 1.7 times stronger leadership, 1.4 times more sustainable growth, 1.5 times stronger growth cultures. We know that we can also add over $28 trillion to the global GDP by 2025. We also know that we see 21% higher business performance and overall employee satisfaction. And when you look in general across the board, you will see companies that are in the top quartile for gender diversity especially on their executive teams, are more likely to experience above average profitability. And when you look at everything happening right now, women are on the front line. Countries run by women are actually more successful in times of crisis. And yet, according to the World Economic Forum, pre-COVID, it will take over 257 years to close the pay gap. 257 years to close the pay gap. And we haven't made a lot of significant change. The United States, according to the World Economic Forum's 144 countries that they measure, the United States 3 years ago was 25. Last year, 41. So we have been going backwards with all this conversation of where we are, where we're going, what we're going to do. We have not made a lot of progress. And most of it, in my opinion, comes to not holding ourselves accountable. If we want change to happen, we're the ones that have to make it happen. We talk a lot about unconscious bias. It's an unconscious bias challenge. But if we're using the word unconscious, then we are conscious. Once we're aware of the problems, it's time to take action, take those steps to move forward, to create the changes that we want to see. And when we look at the impact of COVID right now and the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on women, we are seeing tremendous inequalities, which if we thought there was a gap before COVID, that gap has just widened. And yet we do see over 87% of our healthcare support are women putting themselves on the front line. And 57% of mothers in particular saying that mental health has gotten the worst because of COVID, compared to only 32% of men. And we are seeing anxiety by the billions. I live in Los Angeles in the United States, Los Angeles, California. Anxiety by the billions, especially with working moms. And this has an impact of potentially upwards of $34 billion, the impact especially on working mothers. There was a survey that Working Moms just conducted, and it showed us that 81% of working moms said that their ability to engage in effectively working has been negatively impacted by COVID. And we are seeing reductions in salaries with furloughs and eliminations, especially at entry level, which is predominantly positions held by women, 34% of their salaries being impacted. And so if you think about the number in the United States of working moms, which is over 31 million, making on average $40,000 a year, that's how we are starting to see these numbers of the impact of potentially $34 billion, which has enormous implications and consequences on families, on employees, and most importantly, on our economy as a whole. And then when you look at countries, so the good news is what countries are starting to work on, and we're starting to see the impact. The United States came 19 with women working on peace and security index. Norway, best country for women. Japan, 30 weeks of paid leave. When we start looking at policies that matter and will help us attract and retain our best talent, I think we're going to start seeing rising to the top paid parental leave. And the one incredible thing happening with COVID, now that we're all working at home, equality starts in the home. Caregiving, shared responsibilities. If we can share the responsibilities at home, that will allow us to bring our whole selves and thrive in the workplace as well. And we see in China, Iran, we're seeing all over the place policies that are moving us forward with the ideas in our minds, the consciousness of how do we attract and retain the best talent. We start typically at 50-50 at entry level, and we fall off to less than 17% in the leadership. So not only do we need to close the gaps around parity, closing the wage gap, around pipeline, not just filling the pipeline, but also creating the pathway to leadership. And then how do we look at the policies that we are all creating within our organizations, spending a lot of money, on those policies, but potentially the ability to reallocate funding into policies that will truly make a difference to ensure that we have diversity, inclusivity, equity, and overall equality in the workplace today. And so if we all started thinking about how can we become a quality fit, we all work out so that we can stay healthy. How do we stay healthy with equality inside of our organizations? Leadership, yes, it gets pushed from the top down, but every one of us has that responsibility to do our part and make a difference, big or small. But in order to become a quality fit, we need to have a conscious mindset. We need to eliminate that excuse of unconscious bias. And we need to start putting rigorous tools in place to measure where we are, where we want to go, and how we're going to get there. And sometimes it's just not that complicated. Where there's a will, there's a way. In crisis, and also bringing forward what is that new normal. I hope the new normal is going to be a better normal, where we are all connected with one another, activating those partnerships for change, and most importantly, realizing that equality starts now. There is no better time than to close the door and open a new one for success as we move forward. And so I am really happy to take any questions. I just wanted to give a quick little overview of where we are today and where we could be tomorrow if each of us step up to the plate. So, shukriya. Thank you.
So Shelley, if I may ask a question, how do you see the new normal shaping up, especially in the wake of, or especially keeping in mind the diversity of inclusion? Do you see the practice changing as we move ahead in any significant way or in any better way, or do you think we are going to go back? So what's your take on this?
I'm very well known as a chief troublemaker. I break all the rules that don't make sense and I create the new ones. So I hope we don't go back. I think going back is, I never go back, I always go forward. And I think that, forward for us is incorporating a lot of the connectivity and the relationships that we're now creating, even through virtual. And I think that will help a lot, especially with working moms, from flexibility of schedule. The Zoom, it will never replace in person. And hopefully the day we can shake hands again and be face to face. But I think that there's, right now, Zoom is an or. I think in the new world, and I hope in the better normal, it will become an and we will start incorporating some of these new tools that we are all using today to connect in between and create more flexibility and mobility and accessibility to, women, especially that are primary caregivers. I think this is a wonderful new solution that has always been. It's like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. She could have always gone home, but didn't know to click her heels. We've always had this, but we never embraced it. And so I think this is a moment of embracing the things that are working quite well and not losing that momentum as we move forward. We've also created some tools to assess wage gap. So pre-COVID, being able to look at where companies are from their pipeline as well as for their parity gaps, looking at the gaps across the board. We have now added a new filter, which allows us to look at the COVID adjustments so that we can be aware of where the gap will now be. And I believe it will widen. The shame will be to go backwards and just accept the widening gap as the new norm. We need to be more proactive today. We need to pivot with proactivity to ensure that when we go forward, we will close that door and open the new one. And so these tools allow you to create what if scenario planners so that we can be conscious of the choices that we now need to make.
We have another question, and it says, we talk a lot about women empowering women. I would think that we all need to fight for equality and not for one gendering or empowering. What is your take on this?
Gender equality is not a female issue. It's a social and economic issue. And so, yes, we do need women supporting other women. Historically, women have been so competitive with other women because there's been such a scarcity of jobs at the top. But women are 50% of the population. We can't just support each other. This is a leadership issue. Caregiving is still predominantly a female issue. Leadership is still predominantly by default a male issue. But it isn't about men or women. It is about all of us. It's a leadership issue where we all need to take the actions and support one another to create the changes that we want to see in the workplace, and certainly to unlock all of the global goals across the board. It is about, doing this together and using a new lexicon. When we say we need, male ambassadors or male champions, we're actually putting more power in the hands of men. Men didn't create this problem, neither did women. This is a leadership, inspirational moment for all of us to step up to the plate working together. Madeleine Albright says, women that don't support other women deserve a place in hell. We say that women that support other women deserve a place in heaven. So that is definitely a very necessary ingredient, though.
Thank you, Shelley. Thanks for your participation. Thanks for your talk. And thanks for your views on the subject. I'm again grateful to you, Jacqueline and Carlos, for being with us as keynote speakers for the inaugural session of Diversity Inclusion Conference. With this address of Shelley, we are closing the inaugural session.